this is Douglas Williamson, once again here with Dr. Petra Kuenkel, and we're going to be talking again about her new report to the Club of Rome, Stewarding Sustainability Transformations. The last time we were together, we were talking about living systems and also a little bit about patterns. Today we're going to be talking about her patterns of aliveness theory. So Petra, the question that this raises for me is this word aliveness. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what this word aliveness means to you and how it fits into your theory.
I decided for the word aliveness because I think it just encompasses the most different meanings. People may also talk about vitality, they may talk about thrivability of systems, or they may talk about well-being. So there are different ways of expressing that. I think aliveness has that bigger meaning, and I will maybe go a little bit into details where this is coming from. The patterns of aliveness theory is derived from different multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary streams of research in system theory, but with focus on a systems view of life. So the first background is anything that is related to cognition and to the cognition of patterns. There's a lot written, I can't repeat everything, but the core of that stream is that we do, as human beings, we do recognize patterns. That is very much known, of course, in artificial intelligence, because the entire algorithms are actually working with patterns. But it hasn't been really transformed to the issue of transformative change. So the issue is we need to understand how life operates in patterns, because it does so, and how are we able to cognize or to recognize and to discern patterns that are good and patterns that are bad in the sense of dysfunctional, good in the sense of like helping us towards sustainability. So the second element that is interesting is looking at the resilience discourse. What makes systems resilient? There is a lot of research on social, let's say there is more research on ecological resilience, kind of ecosystems resilience. But this needs to be extended to the discourse on the resilience of socio-ecological systems, the interaction between people and ecological systems. So that's the second stream.
There's a lot of thinking going on in there, and it's I think we just need to parse it out a little bit. I think you're talking about recognizing or creating patterns that add to the aliveness of a system or the resilience of a system. But maybe the question that I asked, and I want to return to that, is what does this aliveness actually mean?
There's an interesting architect. He's an architect, Christopher Alexander, one of the authors. He's also a system theorist. And maybe I'm just going to mention what he says, because he brings out a way of looking at things that is pretty new and which I find is worth kind of taking up. He says we are able as human beings to, in a way, copy nature or learn from nature in a way that we can create a space where aliveness, also human aliveness, is more likely to happen. He calls this the quality without a name. And what's interesting, and that's what I'm taking up in this book, is to bring in the idea of quality in a space in relation to the feeling of aliveness of a person. So that is a core concept. And the interesting addition, and that's the fourth stream of theory and literature that goes into the patterns of aliveness theory, is the work of the kind of semiobiology of looking at intention for aliveness as a core driver of all living beings. And that is at the core of that concept of aliveness that I'm bringing, kind of elaborating in the book, and that I say needs to be at the core of how we approach sustainability transformations, because we want to get towards our capability as human beings in the Anthropocene, towards the capability to help life become more alive. And at the moment, we're doing the opposite.
Okay, thank you. That I think clarified for me some of the questions that I have when you were talking about the sort of ways of looking at these aliveness or resilience in social systems and also in biological or in natural ecosystems. This quality of aliveness, or this quality that can't be named, this is a good thing. This is something we want to foster. Is that what you're saying? Yes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm saying we are probably at the beginning of understanding how, with our level of consciousness, we can support life into more aliveness. I mean, it does it anyway without us. But if at least we are able to learn how to safeguard that process, how to maintain the aliveness of systems, or even how to co-create or regenerate systems, I think we've done a lot. And in many cases, in landscape restoration, we are already doing it. But we have very little understanding of how the process of doing things is actually enhancing the aliveness of systems. And that, I think, needs to be at the core of transformations.
Okay, great. So there's one more tack-on question to that then, which sort of returns to this idea about patterns of aliveness. And I think you started to mention it a little bit, but understanding these patterns or patterns of aliveness, how can we harness that recognition or cognition to foster these transformations?
You know, as with all complexity, you need to kind of pull certain things out of complexity and maybe develop frameworks, models, etc. You just need to be responsible and say, this is just one way of extracting out of complexity a certain way, a certain lens of seeing things. And what I've been doing out of the literature is to actually extract 6 principles that help us to co-construct or alive patterns in the way we transform towards sustainability. And these 6 principles are, in a way, pretty simple. The first thing is on intentional generativity, which means life wants to grow and become more live, more diverse, create more complexity. That's one thing that's absolutely clear. But that in human systems, that means that we need to tap into people's actually ability to co-create and shape the future together. The second principle is on containment, but this containment needs to be permeable. So all life is built in containments, in different containments that overlap and integrate, etc. And so human systems are similar. They work in communities, they work in identification, in meaning making. So we need to look at how we do this in transformation processes. The third principle is on novelty. So life is always creating something new. Life is terribly inventive, even much more maybe than human beings are. So, but it's also human nature to tap into new pathways, to invent something new, to create something, to improve things, etc. So we need to take care of that. And the fourth principle is on the connectedness that is there in life. Life is interconnected, often contextually interconnected in many, many different communication streams and feedback loops, etc. And that is what we are responsive to when we work more and more in networks and in multi-stakeholder collaboration. And the fifth principle is that life always has a kind of an obligation arranged. Let's say that there is a mutual consistency between the whole and the part, or the bigger thing and the individual, etc. So that is about, it's a kind of mutually enhancing wholeness is one of the principles. So we support each other. That is extremely important. And the sixth principle, and that is quite interesting to look at, is about consciousness. It is looking at consciousness as a faculty that is not only human, but a faculty that is existent in life. So it is acknowledging, and there's lots of research on that a lot of living beings, from the small bacteria to us as human beings, are conscious. So they are able to cognize. But as human beings, we need to take this further and advance our ability to reflect while we act. And I think that is a lot happening at the moment in the global consciousness shift towards sustainability and the awareness that we need to actually change our collective behavior on the planet.
So I just want to ask one more question about this. So thank you for that great description of these, at least these 6 elements or dimensions that you say constitute what we need to be perceiving, or perceiving bits and pieces of them, or how they interact with each other, as being dimensions of aliveness, and recognizing in different systems which of these dimensions are really making the aliveness happen, or in what balance and in what patterns they're adding to the aliveness of a system. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just that in, let's say, the change process that we have, like exiting coal mining or kind of adapting to climate change, etc., we cannot constantly deal with rather abstract concepts like mutually enhancing wholeness or permeable containment. However, over time, we can translate this into a model, which is, for example, the collective leadership compass, into a model that breaks it down into the let's say, the level of human behavior. And what is so interesting, if you work in a multi-stakeholder collaboration where there is a culture of collective leadership, you will find that people are mutually supporting each other. You will find that people have a sense of future possibilities. You will find that there is a creative urge, and you will find that there is an ability of reflection that is actually very, very strong. So you find in the end, in a let's say, quality multi-stakeholder process for sustainability that is driven by a culture of collective leadership, you find a systems aliveness that is like mirroring the socio-ecological aliveness that this process wants to see in climate, in biodiversity, in resource management, etc. So that's the connection.
Okay, thanks. I want to leave it there for now because that was a very rich discussion. I think there's a lot to think about, and I do really appreciate that we managed to sort of come from a very conceptual description to having a little bit more down to earth how this gets translated. So this description of the different dimensions of what constitutes patterns of aliveness, or how we can perceive them on, I guess, a very intuitive level, which eventually we can translate these to sort of more practical applications. I think we're going to, you mentioned right now multi-stakeholder partnerships, and I would like for us in our next episode to talk about that. So let's end this episode here, and thank you once again, and for viewers, thanks again for tuning in. That was myself, Douglas Williamson, and Dr. Petra Kuenkel talking about her patterns of aliveness theory within her new report to the Club of Rome, Stewarding Sustainability Transformations. Thank you.